about in Isaiah, it says, look and live. And Spurgeon, his eyes were open at that point, and he got converted when he realized, all I have to do is look. All I have to do is look to Christ. That's it. And we know it was God who was opening up his eyes, but through the weak vessel of the preacher, the preaching of the gospel. And so we're just called to be faithful to the means that God has established through which he works. And that takes the pressure off of us. That person didn't believe. I did something wrong. If I would have just said the right thing, and obviously we want to be accurate in preaching the gospel. We won't want to say, after you've done all that you can do, then you can come to Christ. And we want to present the gospel accurately. It's free, Christ's free grace, and this is what he's done. But, it's as Paul says, some people plant seeds, some people water. God's the one who gives the growth, and so he gets all the glory. Does that kind of make sense? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so the law shows us our need for Christ. So we do preach the gospel, but it's like, well, why do I need the gospel? And the law shows us our need for Christ. I think that the error that's being addressed here is they're saying you need to first start keeping the law, then you can come to Christ. You need to show some strides in keeping the law first. And that's actually an error in understanding the law. It's like, oh yeah, I can keep the law. No, you can't. And that was, the rich young ruler came to Christ and said, what laws do I need to keep? And Christ ends up telling him, give up everything you have and then follow me, and you'll have treasure in heaven. So he's dealing with his idolatry because he thought that he had kept all the law. And he went away sad because he knew he couldn't do it. And while we don't want to say, I need to be at a certain level of understanding that, I need to be at a certain level of contrition or a certain level of viewing my inability before, I need to, you need to shed 42 tears before you can, and you need to be this afraid before you can truly come to Christ. It's not the quality of our conviction, but there still needs to be a conviction that I have not kept the law and I need salvation. And the law does that. The law shows us that we have failed to do it. And therefore, we're under condemnation and we need Christ. And then go to talk about what Christ has done. So we don't tell people to keep the law in order to come to Christ. We say, because you haven't kept the law, come to Christ, who fulfilled the law for us. Does that make sense? Right. 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 Yeah. Good. Anything else? Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Go ahead, Nick. Hmm. 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 That's a really good point, Nick. Yeah, and that's actually a very common struggle for Christians. And I don't know, Tim, you've been in pastoral ministry for 25 years. I've only been in for 5 years, but I've noticed that that's a very common struggle. Is, man, I've blown it, and and I've blown it while seeing the light. I have no excuse for this. Certainly, God is angry at me, and there's a tendency to stay away from God until I've kind of accrued enough righteousness, and it's like, okay, now I think I'm safe. And yeah, that's and this it just shows that that struggle with the law doesn't end throughout the Christian life. That's part of the battle too. That's why I think one of the greatest temptations we have is not prior to coming to sin or prior to sinning, but after we've sinned. It's like, now I got to make up for this because, man, I got to show God that I'm serious here, because I think in our and I share your struggle there, because I think in our mind it's, God can't keep being gracious to me here. I mean, and then we blow it again and blow it again, and man, when am I going to get this right? God, just give me some more time. I'll get this right. Be patient with me, rather than, if He gave up His Son for me while I was an enemy, while I was at my worst, and He gave me grace then, how much more while I'm His child? He's going to continue to freely give me all things. And that's been a great comfort for me. And it's even worse when you see your sin while you're a pastor. It's like, man, how can I continue in pastoral ministry when I struggle with this sin, and I'm impatient, and it makes it a lot worse. So yeah, good point. That is a very common struggle in the Christian life, for sure. Good. Anything else? I was going to say that I think one of the ways we can see if we're just responding to out of a legalistic spirit is, do we show grace to enemies? Do we just condemn them? Those who aren't like us, who don't have it together like we do, who don't think the way we do. And do we show grace to them? Do we have a gracious spirit towards them? Or is it just condemnation heaped on them? I think that's a real telltale sign for if we're acting out of a legalistic spirit, because that's what the law does, right? It just exposes, you're wrong. Look how bad you are. Condemnation for you. No hope for you. Rather than extending grace. Love covers over a multitude of sins, whereas the law exposes. And certainly we want to point out error, but we want to do it in a gracious, loving manner. And I think that will tell what kind of spirit we are. Whether a legalistic spirit, I've got it right, I've obtained righteousness, you haven't, versus, yeah, I'm a fellow sinner too. And I know what it's like to be under condemnation. I deserve God's condemnation, but He's been so gracious to me. He's dealt with me as an enemy in grace, and I can certainly extend that same grace to others. I think that tells if the solvent we're using is grace or a reaction to out of legalism. Any other final questions or comments before we break? Okay. Well, you're dismissed.